lot of accounting jugglery involved in it, and it was done by delaying payments to many institutions and organizations and putting their finances into risk. So the payments which have been delayed past March 31st will have to be made during this year. So the government has a large overhang of payments to be made of expenditure, and at the same time it has to worry about fiscal deficit not becoming unmanageable, nor having a high current account deficit. So given these constraints, what can it do? Well, I think the first thing the government should do is to really make sure that GST is implemented as soon as possible, because the GST can raise revenue because really substantially increasing tax rate, because it is very difficult to evade GST, and therefore your revenue can go up if a GST is implemented. It has also other benefits because it makes India a one common market, and it has its own advantages of efficiency, and therefore I think GST is a very desirable thing to do. Of course, I would say that the most important issue also facing the government is a large problem in the energy sector. So reduce the diesel and LPG subsidy is clearly a very important task that needs to be done, which has been made even more urgent by the happenings in Iraq, because the world prices goes up, crude oil goes up, diesel price, you could say cracking margin goes up, diesel price goes up, and therefore the under recoveries, the difference between the price at which consumers are provided and the cost at which suppliers have to provide that under recoveries are increasing. Now every dollar increase in the price of dollar per barrel increase in the price of crude oil would actually result in something like 3,000 crores of additional under recoveries on account of the products which are currently being subsidized, and these are diesel, LPG, and kerosene. So I think the government should really first and foremost announce, in my opinion, that diesel price is deregulated, but it may not want to increase diesel price at one go fully to the extent required. So it would say that, okay, we are increasing diesel price by maybe a rupee at the most, but diesel price will be deregulated henceforth, and the government will provide a fixed per liter subsidy of say 6 or 7 or 8 rupees, whatever is required, or maybe 3 rupees, and that over time this fixed subsidy will be whittled down. The advantage of this would be that the government's budgetary allocation would be more or less predetermined, that it would give the freedom to oil companies to pass on the burden of fluctuating international prices to consumers, and the consumers will get used to it. We have seen, for example, petrol prices after they've been deregulated going up from 55 rupees to 70, 75 rupees and coming back up and down, and you hardly hear any television comment on it, any dharnas, no newspaper. So people the economy learns to live with these things, and I think that's what we need to do with the diesel price. LPG subsidies are really completely unjustified because a large number of people who use LPG are relatively better off people, high net worth people, many of them. So I think clearly LPG subsidies make no sense. At the same time, you do want people to use LPG, because not using LPG and cooking with dirty biofuels such as wood and dung creates lots of indoor air pollution, and it is a huge health hazard. It has been estimated that something like 500,000 premature deaths take place a year because of the use of dirty fuels. So in some sense, one might say that LPG is a merit good that we would like poor people in all over the country to consume that. Of course, we are not able to provide it to all the rural populations, LPG in a way, but nonetheless, so there is some reason for giving some subsidy of LPG for LPG consumption to the poor. The earlier proposal to limit subsidized LPG cylinders to 6 cylinders per year was raised at instance of Rahul Gandhi to 12 cylinders per year should certainly be reduced back to 6 cylinders, because for most people, if they use LPG with some degree of care, 6 cylinders per year should be adequate to meet their cooking needs. I think, but ideally, the LPG and kerosene subsidies should be provided through direct cash transfer, and there should be only one price for LPG and kerosene. The kerosene subsidy is quite, just to give some idea of level of LPG subsidy, we are giving something like subsidy of 500 rupees per cylinder. That is, our price is around 500 rupees, 450 rupees, depends on, this is from city to city, per cylinder. The price that is paid in Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Pakistan range from 900 to 1,000 rupees per cylinder. So it isn't as if that this cylinder, our subsidy is very, very high, and that needs to be controlled. The kerosene subsidy is another issue, that a large part of the kerosene public distribution system, subsidized kerosene, actually leaks out. So what happens is that we have invested something like 20,000 crores of rupees in refineries to produce cleaner diesel, Euro 4 diesel, and then we release 3 or 4 million tons of kerosene oil through clandestine manner to adulterate that diesel. So whatever investment we have made in cleaning, improving the quality of the diesel is neutralized, and we can see in the air quality in our cities have been going down. One of the large problems with the high current account deficit was that we are importing now coal. The country is importing 125 to 150 million tons of coal today per year. Now we have adequate reserves in the country to produce all the coal that we need, and yet we are importing 125 to 150 million tons of coal. This is I would say, a huge failure in our policy and management of the energy sector. Why does it happen? It happens because Coal India is not able to produce the amount of coal that the country needs. So I think what needs to be done is, most of you probably know that Coal India is a monopoly, and the coal mining was nationalized way back in the 70s, and that only public sector companies are allowed to mine and sell coal. What is needed, however, here, I think, is to denationalize coal, make it open to private sector, both domestic and international, to mine coal, allocate coal, not allocate auction coal blocks in a transparent manner, with a stipulation that unless you work these mines or blocks within a certain period of time, they will be taken back and your deposit will be forfeited. So a strict conditionality should be imposed so that we can step up the coal production and reduce the need for import of coal. There is really no reason why India should be importing coal at all. I think similarly, power shortages are also another issue that keeps investment or efficiency of production down. And I think the government should take steps to make power shortages is a history. If you look at the different zones in India today, east, west, north, south, the western zone has by and large surplus power. Some of the southern zone has deficit power, and eastern zone has and so on. Yet the trading that is not taking place adequately between different zones, and despite the fact that we have now a national grid. And the reason why this is not taking place is that many state electricity regulatory commissions are not passing the cost of higher cost electricity to consumers, and that many distribution companies, DISCOMs, do not have a legally enforced obligation to serve all consumers. So that when they are short of power, the neighbor is willing to sell you power at a certain amount, certain price. The DISCOM says, well, this price is higher than the price at which I'm supposed to sell electricity to consumers, so it is better for me to impose a power cut and not buy this power and sell it to the consumers. So we have capacities nationally created which we are not using in an effective way. because the distribution company, the state electricity regulatory commissions, SERCs, are influenced by state governments and do not permit the increase of price of electricity. So I think here is a reform that is required, that we should make this possible, recognize that the power, the SERCs are really independent bodies and not under the control of the states. Now, I think the other thing is Gujarat is providing 24/7 power to all its villages and households. And if Gujarat can do this in 2.5 years, it would seem to me that it should be possible for the government to realize that it is done in all other states in India as well. And at least they should plan to say that at least in all the BJP-controlled states, 24/7 electricity would be made a reality by maybe end of 2015 or 2016 at the latest. I think this would be a huge signal to make sure that other states also feel competitively pressurized in doing this. I think the other thing that creates, that becomes an obstacle in the development of investment is the Land Acquisition Act of 2013. It provides for even the smallest bit of land that is acquired would require an expert evaluation, which can then be challenged and so on and so forth. And this needs to be modified to make sure that at least land up to a certain amount doesn't require any of these expert evaluation and so on. Paying adequate compensation is required, but there is really these procedures need to be made and streamlined enormously. I think, of course, the government should ensure that price stability stability of policy is there, that it will not take any retroactive actions, and that retroactive actions would not, of any kind of modifications would not take place. I think if you do this would make a huge difference to the investment climate in the country, and people will feel that yes, the country is back on track of a high growth, on a high growth path. I think, but the government has not been elected not just by industrialists, but it has also been elected by people who have their own aspirations. They would, of course, economic growth is an instrument to provide various items of well-being that people would like. For well-being, the government need to provide electricity, round the clock, clean water, clean fuel, clean air, effective and affordable health care, quality education and skills, connectivity through roads and internet, and quick and inexpensive justice. And in all these areas, I think there are measures the government can take or initiate in the first few days that would really give not just the industrialists, but the general people also reasons for optimism that yes, Achhe Din will come here. For example, I have already said for 24/7 power, the Jyoti Gram Yojana of Gujarat should be replicated. We also need to clean up the action, speed up the action to clean up Ganga. Mr. Modi has said yes, this is a high priority item for him. In 2008, I reviewed the Ganga Action Plan for the Supreme Court and found that the level of pollution in terms of coliform count had actually increased from 1984 to 2008, despite the Ganga Action Plan that Rajiv Gandhi had launched way back in the 1980s. So, and the reasons are very clear why this is taking place. What is happening is that the sewage treatment plant which were built under the Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana for various states, various cities, were of inadequate capacities. They were delayed, and the projected populations were much lower than what the actual population in the cities took place. So in most cities I looked at, only less than half of the sewage was treated. The rest was dumped in Ganga untreated. And of course, a large part of the populations did not have sewerage facilities. They were not connected to the sewerage system. And so I think we need to take, if you want to clean up Ganga, we need to take very many measures. We need to certainly make sure that all the sewage that is generated in a city gets treated. Many of the plants that I visited were not properly maintained because the people who were running them said we don't have the resources to maintain that because we cannot levy the adequate charge for processing of sewage treatment. So certainly an appropriate service charge needs to be imposed on sewage treatment, and that sewage plants should have the appropriate adequate resources to maintain and operate those plants properly. We should also make sure that all industries meet their effluent standards and do not get around to it. Some of them get around to it by diluting the effluent and just without treating, but diluting the effluent by taking this water. That doesn't really meet the requirement of cleaning up the river. So we need to enforce strictly the effluent standards on all industries on it. But that's not enough because a substantial amount of pollution comes from open defecation and from the fact that farmers use pesticides and fertilizers not in an effective manner. So a lot of it goes into the runoff that comes from the river and gets again pollutes the river. So it requires a fairly comprehensive action plan to clean up Ganga, or for that matter any other river, and that I think is something we ought to do, because even though it may seem to cost a lot of money, the health cost of not cleaning up these rivers are huge and much larger than what it would cost to clean it up. Similarly, the air quality in cities also need to be cleaned up, and for that I think we need to promote clean up the automobile use. That is, Euro 6 standards of emissions from automobiles has to be imposed 10 years earlier than what we are planning to do, because we are about 10 years behind Europe and other states. Diesel cars are one of the worst pollutants of urban air quality, and because of the subsidy on diesel, these cars are the number of diesel cars are increasing in our cities. So reducing the subsidy on diesel would be an important step to even improving air quality in the cities. I think an important measure is to provide equality of opportunity through quality education, because it is not enough that you have industries goes and creates jobs, but there should also people should have the skills and ability to fill those jobs. And I think we have compulsory education for 8 years, but that compulsory education for 8 years is more or less worthless unless the education has some measure of quality is there. And part of the problem of quality of education in rural areas and in many urban areas as well is the fact that there is a lot of teacher absenteeism. Teachers are not responsible to the local village panchayat or local teachers. I think they should be made responsible and accountable to committees of the parents and panchayat representatives, who should also control their salary and other things. If that happens, then you will have a little more accountability among teachers and teaching will take place. But this is only one step. If you look at a child of 3 years who comes from a poor family background and a child who has professional parents, the difference in vocabulary and cognition, cognitive ability are substantial and very large, and these differences persist over in most cases over the lifetime. And the only way to correct this is to really work at that level, at the Anganwadi level, where children at an early age are given and exposed to all kinds of stimuli of different kinds. And I think it is possible if we really use information technology and make Anganwadis really the hub of excitement and learning for children from underprivileged classes. I think this can be done. I think finally I would say that quick and affordable justice for all is absolutely critical, because judicial delays are a major contribution to corruption and poor governance. And I think it is vital to make judicial reforms so that justice is developed quickly and inexpensively. I think what the government should do is to set up a committee to chalk out a roadmap for doing this in the first 6 months and promise to implement it. Finally, I think agricultural growth is also vital for containing inflation, because currently some people are saying we have all these large stocks of food grains, and if they are released into the market, it will bring down prices. But the fact is that the large stocks of food grains have been built up in order to prevent the price of food grains in the market from crashing. So if you really want to bring the price of food grains to crash, then I think it becomes self-contradictory in some sense. And the other ideas that come about is that we should really go on strongly on holders. But the biggest holder of food grains is the government itself. The non-food grains items like fruits and vegetables, whose prices are the one which really are pushing the inflation, are not really storable commodities, many of them. So there is no question of hoarding here. The only way you can bring the prices of these kind of products down is by producing more, importing more, and also, what is even more important, by reducing the gap between what the price farmers gets and what the price consumers pay. That means eliminate the Agricultural Produce Marketing Control Act, APMCs, and make sure that the farmers are able to sell their produce to whosoever they want and so on. And I think you make the marketing of agricultural produce efficient and free and competitive, you will bring down the prices. And of course, you need to think about planning adequately for import. Milk prices are going up. Milk powder can be easily imported, and you can increase the supply of milk in the country. So these are measures which the government can take to reduce inflation in some sense. Gujarat had a 10% growth rate in agriculture over the last 10 years. And I think this can be ascribed to various measures. It can be done because of GM cotton was used, BT cotton was used, that Gujarat did diversification to cash crops, and it was made feasible by roads and connectivity to farmers to organize markets, and giving soil health card to all farmers so that they can know exactly what kind of inputs and fertilizers they should need to put, which is what I think the government has just announced that it plans to do for all the farmers in the country. And then I think it will also, large number of check dams were built in Saurashtra for groundwater recharge. More than 100,000 of them were built. They were not built by the government as such, was built by private religious organization. Pramukh Swami Maharaj and his disciples did it by Shramadan. But I think things like this are possible in India, and we can do this on a large scale as well. I think I have given a big list of things. One can add many more things for the government to do in the first 100 days. And I think it is extremely important, as I already pointed out,